I wasn't supposed to be there that night. The building was supposed to be dark, quiet, and completely empty. Everyone had gone home hours ago. Or at least, that's what I told myself when I pulled into the parking lot a little after 10:30, engine humming in a sea of silence. I sat there for a moment with my hands locked on the steering wheel, staring up at the glass tower where I spent most of my waking life. From the outside, it looked dead. No lights on, no movement behind the windows, just my reflection in the glass and the faint glow of the street lamps. I could have gone home. I should have gone home. But going home meant walking into an apartment that still smelled faintly like the life I used to have. It meant staring at the empty side of the bed, at the framed photos I couldn't bring myself to take down, at the mug on the kitchen shelf that I still refused to wash because her lipstick stain was the last thing of her I had left. So I did what I'd been doing almost. Every night for the past year, I found somewhere else to be. I killed the engine, grabbed my bag from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the cold. The parking lot was nearly deserted, just my car and one other, a sleek black sedan I recognized instantly. My boss's car. I frowned. That couldn't be right. She never stayed this late. She barely stayed past 6 unless there was a board meeting or a crisis. And as far as I knew, there were no emergencies on the calendar. I hesitated, keys in hand, the cold biting at my fingers. I almost climbed back into the car and drove away, but then I remembered what was waiting for me at home. Silence. And what was waiting for me inside. Work. Silence always lost. Inside, the lobby was too bright. The polished marble floor reflected the overhead lights, throwing my reflection back at me from a dozen angles. The night security guard glanced up from his stool as the doors slid shut behind me. "Working late again, Mr. Cole?" he asked, eyebrows lifting. I tried to smile. "Just grabbing something I forgot on my desk, Marcus. Won't be long." He shook his head. The way people do when they want to say something but know it isn't their place. "That's what they all say." I swiped my badge and headed for the elevators, the echo of his voice trailing after me. "That's what they all say." The ride up to the 23rd floor felt longer than usual. I watched the numbers climb, 10, 11, 12, thinking about how long it had been since I'd slept through the night without waking up with my heart pounding, reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. By the time the doors slid open with a soft chime, I'd convinced myself that my boss's car in the lot didn't mean anything. Maybe she'd taken an Uber home. Maybe she'd left the car for maintenance. The floor was dark. Normally, the motion sensors would trigger the lights as soon as anyone stepped out of the elevator. Tonight, nothing happened. The open plan space that housed the marketing department was just a series of vague shapes. Desks, monitors, chairs, drowning in shadow. I stepped out cautiously and pulled my phone from my pocket, flicking on the flashlight. The thin cone of light cut through the darkness, catching the glossy curve of a monitor here, the silver handle of a filing cabinet there. The air felt heavier at night, colder, like the building itself was holding its breath. My desk was only a few steps from the elevator. I could have walked straight there, grabbed the folder I'd forgotten, and gone right back down. But halfway there, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the building. Soft, distant, wrong. I froze. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning or a pipe or the faint rumble of the city outside, but then I realized there was a rhythm to it, a rise and fall, a deliberate pattern, music, not loud, not clear, but there, like someone had left a speaker on somewhere, far away. I turned slowly, holding my breath, listening. It wasn't coming from my side of the floor, it was coming from deeper inside, past the marketing cubicles, past the glass-walled meeting rooms, toward the side of the building most people only ever saw in photos and quarterly reports. The executive wing. I swallowed. I had no business being in that part of the floor. That was for the important people. The ones whose names were on the doors and on the building and on the checks. The ones whose faces you only ever saw in presentations and framed magazine covers. And above everyone else, there was her, my boss, The woman who built the company from nothing. The woman whose car was downstairs. The woman everyone admired and feared in equal measure. If she was up here, I should turn around. I should. The music grew a little louder as I took a step toward it. It wasn't just music, I realized. There was something else underneath it, a softer sound, a breath, a broken exhale. My grip tightened around my phone. Just get your file and go, I whispered to myself. You don't need to know. But curiosity has always been stronger than common sense, especially when you're already hollow inside, when you've already lost the thing you were most afraid of losing. What's one more bad decision? I walked past my desk, past the conference room where we'd had our last team meeting, past the kitchen where we pretended we were all fine over shared coffee and stale donuts. With every step, the sound grew clearer. Music, movement, something else. By the time I reached the frosted glass doors that separated the regular employees from the executive suites, I could make it out properly. The song was slow, something old and aching, the kind of melody that wraps itself around your ribs and squeezes. My access badge wouldn't open these doors, I knew that. There was a separate system, a different level of clearance, but the doors weren't fully closed. A narrow gap in the center glowed faintly with light from the other side. Someone had failed to let them click shut. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, telling myself to turn around. And then I pushed. The door moved just enough for me to slip through. The hallway inside was dim, lit only by the spill of warm light from an office at the far end. The music was louder here, but still not loud enough to be normal. It sounded like it was coming from a phone or a small speaker. Intimate, private, unmeant for anyone else's ears. I moved down the hall slowly, my shoes silent on the thick carpet. At this distance, I didn't need my phone's flashlight anymore, so I turned it off, letting my eyes adjust. The light was coming from the largest office on the floor. Her office. The door was half open, always closed during the day. Half open now, like an invitation or a mistake. I reached the doorway, my heart rattling against my ribs. And that's when I saw my boss, alone, at nearly 11 at night, doing something I never could have imagined. She was dancing, not the polished, controlled kind of dancing you see at corporate galas or weddings, all practiced smiles and careful steps. This was different, raw, private, something no one is ever supposed to witness. She was barefoot on the dark hardwood floor. Every light in the office turned down except for a single standing lamp in the corner. Her suit jacket was gone, abandoned carelessly on the back of a chair. Her white blouse was untucked, sleeves rolled up, the top buttons undone just enough to make her look human instead of untouchable. Her eyes were closed. Her hair, normally pinned back into a sharp, severe knot, was loose around her shoulders, moving when she did, and she moved like the music was the only thing holding her together. Slow turns, small steps. One hand pressed against her chest as if she needed to keep her heart from falling apart. The music leaked from a small speaker on her desk, soft and distant, something old and sad, a love song from another decade, a song that didn't belong in a boardroom or a pitch meeting, but in a kitchen or a living room or a memory. I froze in the doorway. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I'd seen her give presentations that made grown men in suits sweat through their shirts. I'd watched her cut down proposals with 3 questions and a raised eyebrow. I'd heard her voice through the walls in meetings, calm and cold and absolute. I had never seen her like this. She spun slowly, arms lifting as if she was reaching for someone who wasn't there. Her lips moved around words I couldn't hear. Her shoulders shook just once before she forced them back under control. And then I saw it. The shine of tears on her cheeks. My hand tightened around my phone. The light from the hallway slipped into the room behind me, just enough to cast my shadow over the threshold. I should have left. Closed the door, pretended I'd seen nothing, walked back to my desk like a ghost and gone home to my own empty silence, but pain recognizes pain, even in the dark. She turned mid-step and her eyes snapped open. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Her gaze found me immediately. Her body jerked to a stop like someone had pulled a plug, her bare feet stilled on the floor. The hand that had been pressed over her chest dropped to her side. The expression on her face wasn't just surprise, it was horror. Like I'd caught her doing something criminal instead of just moving alone in her own office. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The music kept playing, pathetic, in the background. A voice from the speaker crooned about forever while my boss stared at me like the world had just ended. Then, without a word, she took 3 quick steps toward the desk and hit the button on the speaker. The music cut off mid-note. The silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. Mr. Cole, her voice was hoarse. Her voice was roughened by tears. What are you doing here? She never used my first name. Never. I swallowed. I forgot something on my desk. I just came back to get it. Her eyes flicked to the doorway, to the gap I was standing in, and then back to me. I watched her switch, right there in front of me, from exposed woman to CEO. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared, her face smoothed over, wiping away everything I'd just seen like it had never happened, except her cheeks were still wet. And you decided to wander? She asked, voice sharper now. Into a section of the floor you don't have clearance for? Heat rushed to my face. I heard something, I said. Music. I thought maybe, I don't know what I thought. I just kept walking. Her jaw tightened. For a second, she looked like she might yell or fire me on the spot or order me back to my department and pretend this never happened. I almost wished she would. That would have been easier. Instead, she reached for the back of the nearest chair with shaking fingers and gripped it like she needed the support. This is inappropriate, she said quietly. You shouldn't be in here. I shouldn't be. She gestured vaguely to the space between us, as if that explained everything. Whatever you think you saw, you didn't. The words were brittle, defensive, a wall going up brick by brick. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I didn't mean to intrude. I should have stopped there, backed away, closed the door and given her the dignity of pretending this never happened, but I couldn't unsee what I'd just seen. Couldn't unknow that the woman who terrified half the company spent her nights dancing alone in a dark office to old love songs with tears on her face. I knew that posture, that tightness in the throat, that desperate attempt to swallow grief and act like everything was under control. I saw it every morning in my own mirror. It's none of my business, I added, my voice quieter now. But you don't have to explain it to me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Explain what, exactly? That you're not okay, I said. The sentence hung between us like a live wire. Her fingers dug into the chair. She looked at me like I'd crossed a line no one had ever dared cross with her. Maybe I had. She was my boss, the founder, the legend. I was a mid-level nobody who spent most of the day making sure other people looked good in their reports. But I also knew what it felt like to fall apart where no one could see you. I shouldn't have said that, I muttered. I'm sorry, I'll go. I took a step back. Wait, she said. The word was soft, but it hit me like a hand on my arm. I stopped. She took a breath, slow and shaky, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost its edge. How long have you been standing there? A minute, I admitted. Maybe less. She closed her eyes just for a second, like she was bracing herself. So you saw. I thought about lying, about saying I only heard the music, about pretending I hadn't seen her spinning slowly in the half-light, holding on to something that wasn't there. Yes, I said. Her throat worked, And what did you see, Mr. Cole? I met her eyes. For once, I didn't look away. I saw someone who didn't want to be alone with whatever they're feeling, I said. That's all. Her expression flickered. For the first time since I'd stepped into the office, her face wasn't just anger and embarrassment. It was something closer to hurt, to exhaustion. She let go of the chair slowly, like she was testing whether her legs would still hold her. You shouldn't be here, she repeated, but there was no real force behind it now. This isn't for anyone else to see. I know, I said. I just couldn't unhear the music. Silence stretched between us. Behind her, the city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. From up here, the streets looked far away, like someone else's life. Finally, she spoke again. What did you come back for? She asked. A file, I said. But that's not the real reason. She raised an eyebrow, the ghost of her usual sharpness. No? No. I took a breath and felt something inside me crack open a little. I came back because I didn't want to go home, I said, because it's too quiet there. Because every time I walk into that apartment, it feels like stepping into a memory I can't wake up from. Her eyes searched my face now instead of avoiding it. And what are you running from, Mr. Cole? She asked, softer this time. The same thing you are, I think, I said. Something I lost. Her fingers curled at her sides, and in that moment I knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time since she founded this company, my boss wasn't the only one caught doing something unimaginable at night. We both were. She stared at me like she hadn't heard me correctly. The line hung in the air between us, fragile and reckless, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. What did you just say? She asked. My heart hammered against my ribs, but backing down now would have been worse than saying it in the first place. Let me join, I repeated, a little steadier this time. You don't have to do this alone, not tonight, not anymore. Her mouth parted in disbelief, then closed again. She took a half step back, as if she needed more distance to think. That's not appropriate, she said finally. There it was, the boss voice again. You work for me, we're in my office. This is already a line we shouldn't have crossed. I know, I admitted. You're my boss. You sign my paychecks. I've written thousands of words about this company with your name at the top. I know exactly how wrong this is supposed to be. Then why would you say that? She demanded, but the hurt hadn't left her eyes. Why would you offer something like that? Because I know what it feels like to be the only one left in the room with your grief, I said. To be alive and feel like everyone else kept living while you stayed frozen in the worst moment of your life. She swallowed hard, fighting the shine in her eyes. You think dancing with me is going to fix that? She asked quietly. No, I said. I don't think anything fixes it. I just think for a few minutes you shouldn't have to be alone with it. Her gaze dropped to my hand, hanging uselessly at my side. I hadn't held it out to her, not yet. I didn't dare. Do you even know how to dance? She asked, a faint, broken attempt at teasing creeping into her tone. Not like you were, I answered honestly, but my wife loved dancing. She'd drag me around our tiny living room until I stepped on her toes enough times that we'd end up laughing on the floor. A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, then faded. I'm not asking you to relive anything, I added. I'm not asking you to forget them either. I'm just asking you to let someone else carry a corner of it with you. For one song. One song. One moment. One tiny rebellion against the isolation we'd both been living in. She looked from my face to the empty floor, then to the silent speaker, then back again. This could cost you your job, she said. You do realize that, don't you? If anyone knew... No one will know, I said. This isn't for them. And what is it for? She pressed. For you to not be the only one hurting in this room, I said, and for me to not be the only one hurting in mine. Something in that seemed to land. Her arms loosened a little from around her body. She exhaled slowly, as if letting out 5 years of breath. "This is insane," she whispered. "Probably," I agreed. "It doesn't mean anything," she added quickly, as if she needed to build a rule around it. "It's not. It doesn't change anything at work. It doesn't blur any lines outside this room." "Understood," I said. "Just two people who are tired of pretending they're fine." She studied me for another long moment, and I could almost see the decision forming in the tight line of her jaw, the way her fingers flexed at her sides. Slowly, she moved back toward the desk. My heart sank for a second, thinking she was about to tell me to leave. Instead, she reached for the small speaker and turned it back on. The same song floated back into the room, soft and aching. The melody seemed even sadder now that I knew what it was wrapped around. She set the speaker down carefully, then turned to face me fully. "Close your eyes," she said. I blinked. "What?" "If you're going to see me at my worst," she murmured, "at least give me a second to pretend I'm not being watched. Close your eyes." I obeyed. The music filled the space between us, the vocals low and distant. For a moment there was only that and the sound of my own breathing, too loud in my ears. Then I heard the faint whisper of her footsteps against the floor, 1, 2, 3, coming closer. "Hold out your hand," she said. I did. A second passed. Then her fingers slid into mine. Her hand was cooler than I expected, smaller. But the grip was steady, even if I could feel the slight tremor running through it. "Open your eyes," she whispered. I did, slowly. She was standing right in front of me now, close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her dark irises, the faint lines at the corners that deepened when she smiled, which right now she wasn't. Her other hand hovered uncertainly in the space between us before she finally placed it lightly on my shoulder. I lifted my free hand, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then set it carefully at her waist. Every nerve in my body seemed to light up at once, not from lust, not from sudden desire, but from the sheer shock of touching another person like this after so long. It felt like waking up in a room full of sunlight after months of sitting in the dark. "If you step on my foot," she murmured, "I am absolutely docking your bonus." It was such a ridiculous thing to say that a laugh burst out of me, sharp and startled. The sound seemed to surprise her too. The corner of her mouth twitched. "I'll try not to make it career-ending," I said. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, bodies almost but not quite aligned to the gentle pull of the music. I moved first, a tentative shift of weight from one foot to the other, creating the smallest possible sway between us. She followed almost imperceptibly. It wasn't really dancing, not at first. It was two people swaying in place, clinging to each other, like they were testing the strength of thin ice. "I haven't done this with someone in 5 years," she said after a while, her voice barely audible over the song. "Me either," I admitted. "It shows." That earned a tiny breath of something that was almost a laugh. We found a rhythm eventually, not graceful, not polished, but real. A slow circle, a step forward, a step back. The kind of movement that wasn't about impressing anyone, just about not being still. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume and something softer underneath, something warm and human that had nothing to do with money or power. "This doesn't leave this room," she said. "Agreed," I replied. "And it doesn't mean—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "It doesn't mean I'm ready for anything, with anyone." "I know," I said. "I'm not either." We moved through the rest of the song like that, two broken people making an unsteady truce with the music and with each other. At some point, I stopped thinking about how inappropriate it was, about the power imbalance, about the politics of the office, or what it would look like if anyone walked in. At some point, it was just her and me and the quiet ache of the melody. The song faded into its final notes. We didn't stop when it ended. The speaker clicked softly into silence, but our feet kept tracing the same slow path across the floor, our bodies still tuned to a rhythm that no longer filled the room but seemed to echo somewhere inside us. Eventually, she drew in a shaky breath, and eased back an inch, just enough to look up at me properly. "I shouldn't have let you do this," she said. "It's a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but it's the first mistake I've made in months that doesn't feel like just another way to hurt myself." Her eyes searched mine, and there was something there now. Recognition, maybe. Or the terrifying relief of realizing you're not the only one, still bleeding. "You should go back to your desk," she said softly, "before we both do something even more irreversible." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to stay in that quiet, fragile space for just a little longer. I let my hand fall from her waist. She released my shoulder. Our fingers lingered for a heartbeat before they slipped apart. At the door, I hesitated and glanced back. She stood in the middle of the office, barefoot and tired, her blouse wrinkled, her hair still loose around her face. Not my boss, not the legend, just Evelyn. "If you ever need someone to be here again," I said quietly, one hand on the door handle, "you know where to find me." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. That night, when I finally did go home, the apartment was just as quiet as I'd left it. But for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel quite as alone with the silence, and I couldn't stop hearing the echo of the song or feeling the phantom weight of her hand in mine. The next morning at work, everything looked exactly the same. Same gray carpet, same low hum of computers, same fluorescent lights washing the color out of everyone's faces. My coworkers clustered in small groups near the coffee machine, complaining about deadlines and clients, trading memes, talking about what they'd watched the night before. None of them had any idea that a few hours earlier their boss had been barefoot in her office, holding onto an employee like he was the only solid thing in a world made of glass. I sat at my desk with a spreadsheet open that I wasn't really seeing. Every time I tried to focus on the numbers, my mind slid back to the feeling of her hand in mine, the way her voice had gone soft when she told me about the accident. The way she'd said it was a mistake, and still hadn't let go until the last possible second. Earth to coal. I blinked and looked up. Maya from my team was leaning against the edge of my desk, nursing a coffee that smelled like too much sugar and not enough sleep. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you spent all night doom scrolling." "Something like that," I said. She squinted at me. "Did you stay late again?" "I swear, if they're not paying you overtime, I'm starting a union just for you." "I just had some stuff to finish," I lied. The real answer was sitting 20 yards and several pay grades away behind a door I suddenly saw differently. "Well, whatever it was, you might want to hide the dark circles before the queen makes her rounds," Maya said. "She's on the floor." My pulse jumped before my brain caught up. "Ms. Hart is here?" I tried to sound casual. Failed. "Yeah, I saw her heading toward the conference rooms," Maya said. "She had that someone's about to lose their budget face on, so, brace yourself." She pushed off my desk and wandered back toward her own. I stared at my monitor a moment, longer than, against my better judgment, glanced down the main aisle. There she was, Evelyn Hart, in full armor. Her hair was pulled back into its usual precise twist, not a strand out of place. Her navy suit was sharp, her heels clicked with purpose, and her expression was that familiar calm, unreadable mask that had been on the cover of at least 3 business magazines. If I hadn't seen her last night, I would have believed this version of her completely. Her assistant trailed a step behind, rattling off something from a tablet. Evelyn nodded once, said something I couldn't hear, and kept walking. As she passed the open area where my team sat, conversation quieted by a fraction. Heads dipped. Screens became fascinating. Everyone pretended not to stare at the woman who decided their budgets, their raises, their futures. I told myself not to look up when she reached my row. I did anyway. For a second, less than that really, her eyes flicked toward me. There was no smile, no nod, no sign that anything was different. Just the barest pause in her stride. So small I might have imagined it. But I felt it. like standing near a door only you know opens to an entirely different world. Then she was past my desk, moving toward the corner conference room, leaving the faint trace of her perfume and a rush of whispered relief in her wake. God, she scares me, someone murmured behind me. Yeah, but in a hot way, another voice replied. I turned back to my screen and forced myself to actually read the numbers this time. Whatever had happened last night, she'd been clear. It didn't leave that room. It didn't change anything at work. It didn't mean she was ready for more than what it was. A moment, a crack in the armor, a mistake. I repeated that word to myself all morning like a mantra. By lunch, I almost believed it. Almost. I ate at my desk, scrolling through emails, half with my mind on a client brief and half on the memory of her voice saying, if you step on my foot, I am absolutely docking your bonus. It was lunacy to find that funny now. Dangerous even. I was still mentally replaying the way her mouth had twitched when my phone buzzed on the desk beside my keyboard. Unknown internal extension. I wiped my hands on a napkin and answered. Cole. Mr. Cole. Her voice came through the line, smooth and composed and unmistakable. This is Ms. Hart. My spine went perfectly straight. Yes, ma'am. There was a brief pause. I could hear faint office noise on her end. A keyboard clacking, a door closing. Do you have a moment? She asked. Us, of course, I said. Did you need something for the Q4 report or? Not over the phone, she said, cutting me off. Can you come to my office? My heart slammed against my ribs. Every instinct I had screamed at me to ask why, to suggest email, to pretend I was suddenly very busy, but curiosity and something else held my tongue. I'll be right there. I managed. When the line clicked dead, my hands were shaking. I shoved my phone into my pocket before anyone could see. You look like you just got called to the principal's office, Maya said, dropping another file onto my desk. It's nothing, I said, standing. Just follow up on a campaign. She snorted. Well, if you don't come back, I'll steal your mug. I forced a weak smile and walked away before she could see that my legs weren't entirely steady. The path to the executive wing felt longer in daylight. The frosted glass doors loomed ahead, the same ones I'd slipped through last night while music pulled me forward. Now they were fully closed, the little red light on the access panel glowing. I pressed the intercom. Yes? Came her assistant's crisp voice. It's Alex Cole, I said. Ms. Hart asked to see me. A second later, the lock buzzed and the doors clicked open. I stepped inside. The hallway was bright now, sunlight spilling through the windows and throwing pale rectangles onto the carpet. Executives' names gleamed on polished plaques beside each door. At the end of the hall, her office door was closed. I knocked once. Come in. Her voice was calm, neutral. The same tone she used in meetings when she was about to dissect someone's presentation. I opened the door. She was standing by the window, back to me, hands in the pockets of her suit jacket. From behind, she could have been any other polished leader in any other corporate office, except I knew better now. Close the door, please, she said. I did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She watched the city. I watched her. Finally, she turned. Mr. Cole, she said, as if testing the distance the title put between us. Ms. Hart, I replied. She studied me for a moment, eyes cool and assessing in a way that made me feel like I was back in one of her quarterly reviews. How are you feeling today? She asked. The question was simple, but the way she said it made it clear she wasn't asking about my workload. I'm here, I said. It was the most honest answer I had. A corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. That makes two of us, she said softly. She gestured toward the small seating area, a pair of armchairs near a low table far from the intimidating expanse of the desk. Sit, please, she said. I obeyed. It felt strange, sitting here as anything other than a name on a graph, a bullet point in a presentation. She didn't sit behind her desk. Instead, she took the chair across from me, mirroring my posture. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people trying to figure out which version of themselves they were allowed to be. "About last night," she said finally. My chest tightened. "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been where I was. I overstepped. If you want me to go to HR or—" "No," she said sharply. "Absolutely not." The certainty in her voice stunned me into silence. "I didn't call you up here to reprimand you," she continued. "If anything, I should be the one apologizing." "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For putting you in an impossible position," she said. "For allowing a boundary to blur that should have stayed solid. For asking you, without saying it, to carry something you didn't sign up for." "You didn't ask," I said. "I offered." "That doesn't change the power dynamic," she replied. "You're my employee. I'm responsible for protecting you, not dragging you into my mess." There was that word again, mess. As if grief was something you spilled on the floor, not something that carved whole pieces out of you. "I don't feel dragged," I said quietly. She watched me, weighing that. "What you did last night," she said slowly, "was unexpected." "So was what you allowed," I countered. Silence settled again, but it wasn't hostile. It was searching. "Did you regret it?" she asked. And for the first time since I'd walked in, I heard it, the small crack in her voice. "No," I said without hesitating. "Did you?" She looked away toward the window, then back at me. "I slept," she said. "For the first time in weeks, I slept more than 2 hours in a row." I hadn't expected that answer. "That doesn't mean I didn't spend the first 30 minutes of my morning convincing myself I hadn't completely lost my mind," she added dryly. A tiny laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "You and me both." Her gaze softened just a fraction. "We can't do that again," she said. "Not like that, not without acknowledging what it is." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, instead of responding directly, she shifted in her chair, resting her forearms on her knees, leaning in just enough that I could see past the CEO and into the woman from last night. "I've spent 5 years talking to therapists, consultants, board members, anyone with an opinion on how I should be living my life after what happened," she said. "They've all had plenty to say about what's appropriate, about timelines, about how a woman in my position should behave." "I've heard versions of that," I said. "I know you have," she replied, "which is why I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." My pulse picked up again. "Okay?" "When you said, 'let me join,'" she paused, as if the memory itself was a fragile object she had to handle carefully. "Was that just about that moment, or was it about something more?" The air between us seemed to condense. I thought about lying, about telling her it was a one-time act of kindness, a fluke, a consequence of too little sleep and too much shared pain. But last night had been the first time in months I'd felt something other than numbness and rage and exhaustion. The first time the ache in my chest had shifted into something that wasn't just loss. "It was about not wanting you to be alone with that anymore," I said slowly, "and if I'm being completely honest, about not wanting to be alone with mine either." Her throat worked. "That's not how these stories are supposed to go," she murmured. "The grieving CEO and the mid-level employee don't bond over their dead." "Maybe they do," I said. "We just never hear about it." She huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh if it weren't so pained. "Do you want to hear what every advisor, every colleague, every well-meaning friend has told me for the past 5 years?" she asked. "Sure," I said, though I already knew my own version. "They tell me it's time," she said. "Time to move on. Time to open my heart again. Time to stop living in the past. Time to let someone in." I nodded. "Sounds familiar?" "What they don't tell you," she continued, "is how to do that without feeling like you're betraying the people you lost. They don't tell you what to do when every small moment of happiness feels like stealing from a ghost." She looked at me directly now, no mask, no distance. "Last night, Alex," she said quietly, and for a few minutes I didn't feel like I was cheating on my husband or abandoning my son. I just felt less alone. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. You weren't, I said. You were letting someone stand in the dark with you. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. This is reckless, she whispered. Dangerous, professionally, emotionally. I know, I said. And yet, she added, I can't stop replaying it. The way it felt when I didn't have to hold myself together alone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then maybe we stop pretending it. Didn't happen, I said. We don't have to name it, we don't have to define it, but we can't pretend we're strangers again. A muscle ticked in her jaw. What are you suggesting? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. I just know that going back to pretending I never saw you dance alone in this office is probably impossible, for both of us. She sat back slowly, absorbing that. Tonight is the anniversary, she said suddenly. Of what? She didn't have to specify. I know, I said gently. You told me it was 5 years next month. I didn't realize it was today. It is, she confirmed. And I had a plan, as I always do. Work until I can't see straight, go home, sit in a house that feels like a mausoleum, drink something too expensive, and then eventually pass out with all the lights on. That sounds... I searched for a word that wasn't insulting. Familiar. Her lips twisted. And now all I can think about is whether I'm going to walk into this office tonight, close the door, turn on that same song, and wonder if you're out there listening. I held her gaze. You don't have to wonder, I said quietly. You can ask. She didn't respond right away. Then very softly, she said, Would you come? The question landed like a stone dropped into a still lake, sending ripples through everything I thought I'd decided about how far I was willing to go. Yes, I said. The answer came out before doubt could catch up. If you want me to, I'll come. She nodded once, as if that matched a decision she'd already made somewhere deep down. Then go back to your desk, she said, slipping a little of the boss back into her tone. Do your work, act normal. If anyone asks, this was about a campaign. And tonight, I asked? She hesitated. Tonight, she said slowly. If you're still here at 10, you might hear music again. Our eyes met. And if I do? I asked. Then, she said, a hint of something fragile but determined in her voice, maybe I won't dance alone. The day moved in slow motion after that. I walked back to my desk with my heart pounding and my face carefully blank, like I'd just come from a routine check-in instead of a conversation that shifted the ground under my feet. The open floor swallowed me again. Keyboard clacks, email pings, someone laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't that funny. I sat down, opened a document, and stared at it long enough that the words blurred. Everything good? Maya asked, rolling her chair over with a squeak. Yeah, I said, meeting about the Q4 messaging. Nothing exciting. She groaned. Q4 is never exciting. It's just numbers and fake cheer. I managed a small smile. You're not wrong. Work mercifully did what it always did. Filled time. Tasks stacked on tasks. Emails needed answers. A client wanted a last-minute tweak to a campaign we'd already sent to production. There were metrics to analyze, projections to refine, slides to clean up before next week's presentation. Each small demand chipped away at the hours between me and 10 o'clock. By 6, most of the floor started thinning out. Coats appeared on chair backs. Goodnights floated over the cubicles. Someone announced they were going for drinks, and a few people gathered their things to join. You coming? Maya asked, already halfway into her jacket. I've got a few things to finish, I said, tapping my keyboard. Rain check? She squinted at me like she didn't quite believe me, then shrugged. Your loss. If you get fired for working too hard, I'm stealing your chair. Noted. By 7, the lights dimmed automatically in the areas no one was moving. My corner stayed bright, my presence tricking the sensors into thinking the day wasn't over yet. By 8, the office felt hollow. The cleaning crew came. Through. Silent figures with carts and trash bags. One of them gave me a nod as she emptied my bin. I nodded back, both of us participating in the unspoken agreement that some people just lived here now. My phone buzzed once around 9. No name, just a number I already recognized. 10 still works, came the message. My chest tightened. Yes, I typed back. I'll be here. No reply came. There didn't need to be one. Time after that became slippery. Minutes stretched and collapsed. I checked the clock every time I finished a small task, convinced that at least half an hour had passed, only to find it had been 6 minutes. At 9:40, I stood and walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, staring at myself under the harsh lights. I looked tired, older than I was. There were lines at the corners of my eyes I didn't remember having before all this. My hair was a little mussed from running my fingers through it all day. My tie was loosened. My shirt sleeves were rolled up. I looked, I realized, like someone who had been standing at a crossroads for a very long time and had finally decided to move. Don't read into anything, I told my reflection quietly. She said nothing changes. This is just two people carrying something together. That's all. My reflection didn't look convinced. Back at my desk, the clock finally flicked over to 10 hours. The office was nearly silent now. Most of the main lights had clicked off, leaving only the emergency strips and a few pools of illumination over the exits. My little island of brightness felt suddenly exposed. I stood, grabbed my phone, and let the darkness swallow me as I walked away from my desk. The path was familiar now. Past the empty meeting rooms, past the kitchen with its humming refrigerator and abandoned coffee cups, past the elevator that could have taken me home. The frosted glass doors to the executive wing were closed again, but the red light on the panel was already green. I didn't have to press the intercom. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway was dim, lit only by low wall lights and the faint spill of illumination from one office at the far end, her office. The door was half open. Music drifted out. Not the same song as last night, something different this time, still slow, still aching. A piano this time, soft and hesitant, like someone thinking out loud. My heart pounded as I walked down the hall, the carpet muffling my footsteps. No one else was here. No assistants, no board members, no staff. Just us. I reached the doorway and paused. She was there. Not at her desk this time, not by the window. She stood in the middle of the room, barefoot again, her shoes abandoned near the wall. Her suit jacket was off, draped over the back of a chair. She'd loosened the collar of her blouse, the top button undone. Her hair was half down, pins loosened, strands slipping free. She wasn't dancing. Not yet. She was just standing there with her eyes closed, breathing slowly as if preparing herself for something. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without opening her eyes. "I said I would," I replied. She let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "I almost talked myself out of it," she admitted. 3 times. "What stopped you?" I asked. Her eyes opened. She turned to face me. "You did," she said simply. For a second, we just stared at each other. In the softer light, she looked less like the woman from magazine covers and more like the one who'd sat across from me earlier, confessing how tired she was of timelines and advice. "I was going to start without you," she said. "Old habits, old rituals. It felt wrong." "Because?" I prompted gently. "Because for the first time in 5 years, I didn't want this to be mine alone," she said. Something in my chest shifted at that, not gone, not healed, but less sharp. "Then let's not make it yours alone," I said. She studied me, as if searching for any hint of doubt. "You understand what this is," she said, "what it isn't." "Yes," I said. "It's not about replacing anyone. It's not about pretending we're not broken. It's not about pretending this doesn't cross about 100 lines. A faint, pained smile touched her lips. "So what is it then?" she asked. It's two people who have been standing in separate dark rooms for years, I said, and are finally choosing to stand in the same one for a while. Her throat worked around whatever that did to her. The piano continued softly in the background, notes threading between us. She took a small step toward me. "Close the door," she said quietly, "please." I did. The click of the latch sounded louder tonight, more deliberate. A choice, not an accident. When I turned back, she was waiting in the middle of the room, the lamplight casting a warm halo around her. "Do I need to give you instructions again?" she asked, a tiny spark of dry humor in her voice. "I think I remember," I said. "Let's see," she murmured. I crossed the floor toward her, every step a small act of rebellion against the version of myself that had promised never to let anyone close again. When I reached her, I didn't immediately reach out. I waited. She bridged the last inch between us. Her hand found mine first this time. Her fingers slipped into my palm with less hesitation, as if some part of her remembered our last unsteady circle and wanted to start from there, instead of from scratch. Her other hand rested lightly on my shoulder, right over the place her tears had dampened my shirt the night before. I lifted my free hand and placed it at her waist. We were closer than we'd been last time, not dramatically, just enough to feel the warmth of each other more clearly, the subtle rise and fall of breath. "Still thinking about docking my bonus if I step on your foot?" I asked, my voice low, her lips actually curved this time. "You're not getting a raise out of this, if that's what you're asking." "I'll survive." "We'll see," she said. We started to move. It felt less like learning a new dance and more like picking up a conversation we'd paused mid-sentence. The same slow sway, the same small turns, the same careful awareness of where we ended and the other began. But there was something else layered over it now. Trust, maybe. Fragile and new, and still covered in the dust of our respective ruins, but present. "Today," she said after a while, her cheek near mine, "I walked past his room and didn't go in." Her voice brushed my ear. "Your son's?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Every year on this day, I go in. I sit on the floor. I pick up his toys. I look at the last drawing he made. I torture myself with details." "And this year?" I prompted gently. "This year I stood in the doorway," she said, the words careful. "I put my hand on the frame, and then I walked away." "Was that easier?" I asked. "No," she said, "just different." We turned slowly, the city lights spinning in the windows behind her. "I kept thinking about what you said," she added. "Which part?" I asked. "I talked a lot for someone who usually hides behind PowerPoints." "The part about not wanting to live in a different kind of death," she said. "About how shutting everyone out is just another way of disappearing." I swallowed. "It took me a long time to admit that," I said. "That I wasn't honoring her by staying miserable. I was just stuck." "And now?" she asked. "Now I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "But I know that when I'm here like this, it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like—" I searched for a word that didn't sound ridiculous. "Breathing." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever talk to her?" she asked. "Your wife?" "Yes," I said. "All the time." "About this?" she asked, voice even softer. I let out a slow breath. "Yeah," I said. "In the car, in the shower, in my head when I can't sleep. I tell her I'm confused, that I miss her, that I don't know how to want anything that doesn't have her in it, and that lately there's this person who makes the room feel less empty." Her fingers tightened just a little on my shoulder. "What do you think she would say?" she asked. "For a long time I was sure she'd be angry," I said, "that she'd look at me the way people do when they say, 'already?' or 'so soon?' and pretend it's concern instead of judgment." "And now?" she pressed. "Now," I said slowly, I hear her voice telling me I'm an idiot for waiting this long to let anyone in, that I'm allowed to be alive even if she isn't. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. I talk to them too, she whispered. To my husband, to my son. I tell them about the company, about the deals, about how much I hate that they're not here to see any of it. My hand moved slightly at her waist, a subconscious attempt to anchor her. And I tell myself, she continued, that if James were here, he'd tell me I'm being dramatic, that I'm allowed to be more than the woman he loved, that grief shouldn't be the only identity I keep. Maybe that's the thing, I said quietly. Maybe the people we loved hate the idea of us freezing our lives in the moment we lost them. She exhaled shakily. If that's true, she said, then right now they're both probably yelling at me to stop overthinking and just let myself feel this. This, I echoed. We didn't define it. We didn't have to. The song shifted into another, same tempo, different melody. We didn't break the contact between us, didn't reset, just kept moving. After a while, our conversation drifted away from the sharp edges of death and into smaller, softer memories. She told me about the time her son had insisted on wearing a superhero cape to school. I told her about how my wife used to fall asleep in the middle of movies and then swear she'd seen the whole thing. We laughed quietly in between the pain. At some point, my cheek brushed hers, not by design, just a consequence of the closeness and the slow turning. Neither of us pulled away. If anything, she leaned in a fraction. It wasn't romantic in the way movies made scenes like this look. There were no sweeping dips, no dramatic declarations, no sudden rush of violins. It was two people standing in the middle of their own wreckage, choosing to hold on to each other long enough to remember what warmth felt like. When the second song ended, we stopped moving, but we didn't step apart. Her forehead rested lightly against my shoulder. My chin hovered near her temple. Our hands were still joined between us. "Tell me this is okay," she whispered. There was something raw in her voice that I hadn't heard even when she talked about the accident. "It's okay," I said. "We're allowed to not be okay alone." She nodded against me. We stayed like that for a long time. No dancing, no talking, just standing. Two people whose lives had been ripped open, holding each other in a room high above the city, letting the silence finally mean something other than absence. We didn't make any promises that night. No grand vows, no dramatic ultimatums, no from now on or never again. We were both too careful, too used to losing the things we held on to too tightly, but something quiet shifted between us all the same. Eventually, the clock on the wall inched closer to midnight. The building systems registered the hour and did what they always did. Dimmed the lights a little more, cycled the air, reminded us that the world kept turning whether we were ready or not. "I should let you go home," she murmured, her voice still, close to my collar. "You've been here all day." "I've been somewhere else most of the night," I said softly. "This doesn't feel like the office." She breathed out a faint sound that might have been a laugh. "That's probably dangerous." "Probably," I agreed. She eased back a little, just enough to look up at me. There was a red imprint on her cheek where it had rested against my shirt, and her eyes were shiny, but there was a softness there that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "I needed this too." "That may be true," she said, "but I've learned not to underestimate what it costs people to willingly step into someone else's sadness." "It costs more to stay in your own alone," I said. Her gaze held mine for a long moment. "You're very good at saying the kind of things my therapist would underline," she said quietly. "Is that a compliment?" I asked. "It's an observation," she replied, but the faint curve of her mouth gave her away. We let go of each other slowly, hands leaving last, fingertips brushing before separating. The loss of contact felt disproportionate to how little we'd technically done, how nothing about this would make sense to anyone who hadn't spent years grieving. She walked to her desk and turned the speaker off. The room fell into a truer kind of silence, one that made the echoes of the music feel like a memory already. For a second, neither of us knew what to do with our hands. "This doesn't have to be anything," she said finally. "Not in the way people would assume. I don't have the energy to be anyone's fantasy, Alex. Not the powerful boss, not the tragic widow, not the inspirational comeback story." "I don't need a fantasy," I said. "I just need something real that doesn't hurt all the time." Her eyes flashed with something that looked a lot like recognition. "Real?" she repeated softly. "That's in short supply up here." "I noticed," I said. She took a breath, as if steeling herself. "I can't give you stability," she said. "I can't promise I won't pull away. There are days when I barely make it out of bed, and others when I bury myself so deeply in work I forget to eat. There will be board meetings, rumors, raised eyebrows. I won't always handle it gracefully." "I can't promise much either," I admitted. "Some days I still wake up reaching for someone who isn't there. Some nights I can't sleep in my own bed. I've forgotten how to be in something that isn't temporary or on fire." We looked at each other, the honesty between us almost too bright. "Then maybe we don't promise," she said. "Not yet. Maybe we just allow." "Allow what?" I asked. "It's this, she said. "Whatever this is, however long it feels like it's helping instead of hurting." I thought about all the advice I'd ignored over the past year and a half, about the people who told me to get back out there like I'd misplaced my keys instead of my marriage, about the ones who cautioned me not to rush into anything new because you're vulnerable right now. They were all right in their own ways from a safe distance, but none of them had been in that room with us, two people who'd been bleeding quietly for years, finally putting their wounds on the same table. "Okay," I said, "we allow it." Her shoulders dropped an inch, like I'd taken some weight from her even with those two words. "I'm not ready to see you differently at work," she added. "Not yet. I need the mask there. The distance. I can't function if I don't have that." "I understand," I said. "You're my boss from 9 to 6. I'm a name in your inbox and a voice in a meeting." "And after 6? She asked. "After 6, I said, feeling the words settle into place. "I'm the person who knows the song you dance to when you think no one's watching." Something flickered in her eyes at that. Pain, fondness, fear, all stacked together. "That feels dangerously intimate," she murmured. "It already is," I replied. "We're just admitting it now." A small silence passed between us, gentler than the others. "You should get some sleep," she said finally, "and not at your desk." I glanced at the clock. "You too." She didn't answer that. Instead, she moved to her chair and picked up her shoes. For a second, I thought she was going to put them on, slip back into the role the world knew, but she just held them loosely at her side. "I'll walk you out," she said. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. "I want to." We left the office together, the door closing softly behind us. The hallway felt even quieter with just the two of us in it. Our footsteps were muffled by the carpet. The music's absence buzzed in my ears like the space left after a loud noise. At the frosted glass doors, she reached out and pressed the panel to unlock them. The mechanism clicked, and the doors parted. This, I realized, was where most versions of this story would end. A meaningful look in the threshold, a loaded goodbye, a fade to black. But life wasn't a neat edit. We walked together back through the darkened floor, past the silhouettes of desks and chairs, past the glow of sleeping computer monitors. The elevator waited at the end of the aisle, its digital display a small rectangle of red. She pressed the button. We both watched the numbers descend toward us. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, I'll probably overthink everything we said tonight." "Me too," I admitted. "And the day after that," she continued, "someone on the board will mention that I seem distracted, and someone will remind me of my responsibilities, and someone will drop the word optics into a sentence like it's the only thing that matters." "Probably," I said. Her eyes shifted to me. "And somewhere in the middle of all that," she finished, I'll remember you said you don't need a fantasy, and I'll try to believe you. I don't, I said. I just need you to not pretend you're made of stone when you're not. She looked at me like no one had ever said that to her before. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. We stepped inside. On the ride down, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The quiet was different now, not empty, not hostile, just full. When the doors opened into the lobby, the night guard looked up from his monitor. "Working late, Ms. Hart," he said, immediately more alert at the sight of her. "As usual," she replied, the smooth public voice back in place like a well-worn coat. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night," he said, then glanced at me. "You too, Mr. Cole, you two trying to outwork each other?" "Something like that," I said. We walked side by side into the cool night air. The parking lot was mostly empty again, cars scattered like punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. We stopped between our vehicles. Her sleek, black sedan, my older, less impressive car. This, I realized, was another threshold. "Thank you," she said again. Softer now that we were away from other ears. "For tonight, for last night, for telling me the truth when it would have been easier to say nothing." "Thank you," I countered, "for letting me into a part of your life you've clearly guarded with everything you have." Her gaze dropped briefly to my hands, then rose back to my face. "Drive safe," she said. "You too," I replied. We lingered a moment longer. The urge to say something more, to name it, to ask for more, to promise, pushed against my ribs. Instead, I said, "If you ever need another song," she nodded. "You'll hear it." She unlocked her car and opened the door. Before getting in, she looked back at me one last time. In that look, there was history she hadn't told me yet, fear she hadn't voiced, hope she hadn't allowed herself in years, and there was also this new thing, this fragile, terrifying, undeniable thing that had started in a dark office with a song and a whispered, "Let me join." Then she got in, closed the door, and drove away. I stood there for a long moment watching her taillights disappear into the city. When I finally slid into my own car and rested my hands on the steering wheel, the silence didn't feel as suffocating as it usually did. I knew for the first time in a very long time that somewhere out there, in a house that used to be a graveyard and might one day be something else, someone else, was looking at their ceiling, thinking of the same songs, the same steps, the same impossible, unpromised maybe. And somehow, that was enough to make the night feel a little less empty. The days that followed didn't change on the surface. She was still Ms. Hart in the office, sharp, efficient, unshakable. She still cut through weak proposals with 2 questions. She still walked the floor with that same calm, contained power that made people sit up straighter when they heard her heels. But there was a crack in the glass now. I'd seen it. She knew I'd seen it. And once you've watched someone fall apart behind a closed door, it's impossible to look at them under fluorescent lights and believe they're made of steel. We didn't talk about that night, not directly. At work, our interactions were almost painfully professional. She'd call on me in meetings, "Mr. Cole, can you walk us through the Q3 consumer response data?" And I'd stand and do the thing I was good at, turn numbers and behavior into a story the room could understand. Sometimes when the others were arguing about budgets and timelines, I'd feel her eyes on me, a glance, a small shift of attention. Nothing anyone else would notice. But I felt it. Once after a presentation, she caught up with me near the elevators. "Good work," she said, in that same even tone she used with everyone. "Your framing on the retention data was effective." "Thank you," I said. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Then the elevator arrived, and she stepped in with 3 members of the executive team, her expression sliding back into the version of herself the world expected. If anyone noticed that I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath, they didn't say anything. Nights were different. We didn't meet every evening. That would have been too much, too fast, too dangerous. There were days when she left at 6 sharp, swept out of the building with her bag over her shoulder and her jaw tight like she couldn't bear another second inside those walls. On those nights, I went home, sat on my own couch, and told myself that this was good, healthy even, that the space between us would keep whatever we were from burning out too quickly. But some nights, when the floor emptied and the building settled into its after-hours hush, I'd hear it. Faint at first, a thread of melody winding through the quiet. Sometimes it was a piano, sometimes it was a voice. Once, it was nothing but strings, a violin scraping out a song that felt like someone had put longing itself into sound. I always hesitated. I'd sit at my desk with my hands curled around a cold mug, staring at the darkened hallway that led to the executive wing. I'd tell myself I could ignore it, that she hadn't actually asked, that maybe she wanted to be alone this time, and then I'd remember the way she'd whispered, "Tell me this is okay," and the way her shoulders had finally dropped when I said it was. Every time, after a few minutes of pretending I wasn't going to move, I stood up. The routine became familiar. Lights dimmed. Doors clicked shut behind me. The carpet softened my footsteps. The glass doors opened with their quiet sigh. Her office door would be half open or not quite latched, the light inside low and warm. Some nights she was already moving when I arrived, spinning slowly in the center of the room, eyes closed, letting the music carry her somewhere I would never fully see. Other nights, she stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the city like she was trying to decide whether it was something she wanted to rejoin. But every time she heard the door, she didn't flinch anymore. She'd look over, meet my eyes, and I learned to read the night in that first look. Tonight is heavy. Tonight is lighter. Tonight I need you close. Tonight I just need you here. We didn't always dance. Sometimes we did. Falling into that same slow, careful orbit, hands finding their now familiar places. We talked while we moved, about our days, about the latest fire at work, about the tiny mundane details that had been absent from our lives when everyone was afraid to ask us normal questions. Sometimes we just sat. She'd sink into the couch near the window and curl her bare feet under her, and I'd take the other end. We'd let the music play low while we told each other stories about the people we'd lost. I learned that her husband had been the one who believed in the company before anyone else, that he'd stayed up late designing her first office space with his own hands. I learned that her son used to fall asleep at the kitchen table, crayon still in his fist, mid-drawing. She learned that my wife had hated the hospital food so much she'd made me sneak and take out in my jacket pockets, that she'd named every plant in our apartment and talked to them when she thought I wasn't listening, that she'd written lesson plans from a hospital bed because she refused to let her third graders have a substitute who didn't know their names. "I feel like I know her," Evelyn said once quietly. "A little." "I feel like I know him," I said back. "And your boy." They weren't just ghosts anymore, not in those moments. They were people we loved, introduced like friends at a dinner party neither of us had ever planned to attend. Other nights, we didn't say much at all. We'd share the same space, each of us leaning back with our eyes closed, letting the presence of another living, breathing person do the work words couldn't. On one of those quieter nights, she broke the silence without opening her eyes. "People are starting to notice," she murmured. My stomach tightened. "Notice what?" "That you stay late," she said, "or that I do too." "And?" I asked carefully. "And this company is a machine that eats gossip for breakfast," she said. "They don't have anything concrete, just patterns, changes." "Are you worried?" I asked. She opened her eyes and turned her head to look at me. "I'm always worried," she said. "About optics, about whispers in rooms I'm not invited to anymore, even though my name is on the building." "And us?" I asked, the word small but heavier than anything else in the room. "Are you worried about that?" She didn't look away. "I'd be a fool not to be," she said. But for the first time in a long time, I'm asking myself if it's worth being a little foolish. What's the verdict so far? I asked, my heart beating too hard for such a soft conversation. She considered that. Jury's still out, she said, but they're listening to new evidence. We fell into an easy silence after that, the kind where you don't feel the need to fill every gap. I started to notice how the nights changed her days. On mornings after we'd stayed late together, she seemed different, not less focused, not less sharp. If anything, there was a steadier quality to her. She interrupted fewer people, listened more, smiled once or twice in ways that weren't calculated for effect. No one else seemed to connect it to anything. They chalked it up to a good quarter or a successful deal, to a win with a client, to a new feature launching on schedule. I knew better. One week, after a stretch of particularly brutal meetings and a looming investor call, I didn't hear music. The office emptied. The lights dimmed. 10 o'clock came and went. Nothing. I stayed an extra hour anyway, telling myself I just wanted to get ahead on a presentation. But when I finally packed up and walked through the quiet floor, the executive hallway was dark. Her office door was closed. No light underneath. No faint line of music leaking out. A strange worry knotted in my chest. I thought maybe she'd gone home early. That exhaustion had finally forced her to collapse into sleep like a human being instead of a myth. The next morning, I found out the truth. It's like she was possessed, one of the senior managers whispered near the coffee machine. Tore that proposal apart in 10 minutes. Haven't seen her that ruthless in years. Apparently the board pushed back again, someone else said, something about restructuring. They want to optimize leadership, whatever that means. I didn't need anyone to explain it. That afternoon, my internal line lit up. Mr. Cole, her assistant said, Ms. Hart would like to see you. When I knocked on her door, her voice sounded tired. Come in. She was behind her desk this time, sleeves rolled up, tie to her hair loosened. Papers were spread out around her like she'd tried to bury herself in work, and it hadn't quite taken. You wanted to see me? I asked. Yes, she said, and closed the door. I did. She waited until the latch clicked before she dropped the pen from her hand and leaned back in her chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. They think I've lost perspective, she said without preamble. Who? I asked, though I already knew. The board, she said. They're using words like balance and stability and emotional distance. They're concerned I'm too close to the ground, too involved. Too human? I suggested. A humorless sound escaped her. More or less. She picked up a page and let it fall again, like the weight of it was too much. They don't say it outright, she continued, but it's there, under every question. Are you sure you're ready for this scale? Are you sure you're making decisions for the right reasons? Are you sure your personal history isn't clouding your judgment? Because you don't want to fire people for sport? I asked. Monsters. Her mouth twitched. The irony, she said, is that they're worried I'm too soft because I'm finally not working myself into the ground so hard I forget what day it is. I understood then why there had been no music the night before. You didn't come back last night, I said quietly. She met my eyes. No, she said. I didn't think I could be that version of myself, not after having my competence questioned for the 100th time by people who have never built anything from scratch. And, I asked, how did that go? I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, she said. I counted the cracks in the paint. I traced the shadow of the tree outside my window until the sun came up. And at some point around 3 a.m, I realized something that annoyed me. What? I asked. She sighed. I missed the music, she said, and I missed you. The honesty in that simple sentence hit me harder than any grand confession could have. I took a slow breath. I was here, I said, in case you did. She closed her eyes briefly, like that information hurt and soothed all at once. We can't keep doing this indefinitely, she said, sneaking around the edges of it. treating it like a ghost we're both pretending not to see. Then we stop pretending, I said, at least with each other. That's the problem, she replied. With each other, it's easy. With the rest of the world. She trailed off, her gaze moving to the window where the city sprawled out, full of people who would never know what it took to sit in this office and talk about not wanting to be alone in the dark. We don't have to tell the rest of the world anything yet, I said. We don't even know what we'd call this if we did. She looked back at me. What would you call it? She asked. I thought about it. A truce, I said finally, between the part of us that wants to stay frozen and the part that's tired of being dead while still breathing. Her expression softened just a little. A truce, she repeated. I like that better than whatever my advisors would label it. Then we start there, I said, a truce. Nights we both know we won't be alone if we don't want to be. Days where we're allowed to pretend we're just names on emails if that's what it takes to get through. She was quiet for a moment. You make it sound so simple, she said. It's not, I replied. But neither is spending another 5 years pretending the only way to honor the people we lost is to keep punishing ourselves. She exhaled slowly, then nodded. Tonight, she said, I'll turn the music on again. I'll hear it, I said. She gave me a look that felt like its own kind of promise. And for the first time in a very long line of long days, I walked out of her office feeling like the night ahead might hold something other than more of the same ache. 3 weeks passed in that strange new rhythm. Days at work felt manageable in ways they hadn't before. Not easier exactly, the board still circled like vultures, deadlines still stacked. Clients still demanded the impossible. But I had a secret tether now. A quiet knowledge that when the building emptied and the lights dimmed, I wouldn't be the only one left standing in the wreckage of my own thoughts. Some nights we danced, others we just talked. Once we didn't speak at all, just sat on opposite ends of her couch while a documentary played on her laptop, the volume low, both of us pretending we were watching when really we were just breathing in the same room. It was fragile, undefined, and somehow the most honest thing in my life, until the night it all cracked open. I'd known the date was coming. She'd mentioned it weeks ago, almost in passing, like she was testing whether I'd remember. The accident was in late November, she'd said one night, her voice quiet. But his birthday is in December. That's the one that breaks me every year. Your son's? I'd asked. She nodded. December 13th. He would have been 12 this year. I'd marked it on my calendar, not because she asked me to, but because I knew what those dates felt like. How they loomed, how the days leading up to them felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff you couldn't avoid. On the morning of December 13th, I came into work early. The office was nearly empty, just a few people from IT in the corner, the hum of machines waking up, the smell of coffee brewing in the break room. I sat at my desk and waited. By 9, the floor had filled. Meetings started. Phones rang. The machine of the workday cranked into motion, but Evelyn didn't appear. Her assistant arrived at her usual time, but when I glanced toward the executive wing, Evelyn's office door stayed closed. No lights inside, no movement. At 10, someone mentioned she'd called in. Ms. Hart isn't coming in today, her assistant said when someone asked about rescheduling a call. She's handling something personal. The words landed like stones in my chest. I knew what something personal meant. I made it through the morning on autopilot, answered emails, joined a conference call, nodded at the right times, but my mind was somewhere else, entirely. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone and stared at the blank message screen. We'd never texted, not once. Our communication existed only in those late-night rooms, those soft-lit hours when the rest of the world had gone to sleep. But this felt different. I typed carefully. I know what today is. You don't have to be alone with it. I stared at the message for a full minute before hitting send. The reply came faster than I expected. I'm not at the office. I can't be there today. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then tell me where you are. A long pause. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, home. And then a second later, you shouldn't come here. I stood up from my desk without thinking, grabbed my jacket, and walked straight to the elevator. Maya looked up as I passed. You okay? Emergency, I said. I'll be back. I didn't wait for her to ask what kind. Her address wasn't hard to find. Executive bios were public, record, and the company directory had more information than most people realized. The drive took 20 minutes, long enough for me to second-guess myself a dozen times, long enough to realize I was crossing a line we'd never even discussed. But I kept driving. Her house sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street in a neighborhood that screamed old money and careful privacy. It was large but not ostentatious, stone and wood, with wide windows and a front garden that looked like someone used to care about it but had stopped years ago. I parked on the street and stared at the front door. This was insane. Showing up uninvited at my boss's house on the worst day of her year because I couldn't stand the thought of her sitting alone in that grief. I should have turned around. Instead, I got out of the car. The walkway to the front door felt longer than it was. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hand shook slightly as I raised it to knock. Before I could, the door opened. She stood, there in the doorway, barefoot, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that looked like it had belonged to someone else first. Her hair was down, uncombed. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She looked at me like she couldn't believe I was real. "Alex," she said, my name a breath more than a word. "You said I shouldn't come," I said quietly, "but I couldn't stay away." Her throat worked. For a second, I thought she might tell me to leave, that this was too much, too far, too complicated. Instead, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," she whispered. I stepped inside. The house was beautiful in the way abandoned things are. High ceilings, elegant furniture, everything carefully chosen and then left to gather dust in the corners of a life that had stopped being lived. Photographs lined the walls. I saw them immediately. A man with kind eyes and a warm smile, a little boy with her nose and his father's grin. The 3 of them together, at the beach, at a park, in front of a Christmas tree. Evelyn followed my gaze. "I can't take them down," she said. "I've tried. I stand here with a box and my hands just stop." "You don't have to take them down," I said. She closed the door behind me and wrapped her arms around herself. "I woke up this morning and couldn't get out of bed," she said, her voice flat. "I just lay there staring at the ceiling thinking about how he'd be 12, how he'd probably be taller than me by now, how his voice would be changing, how he'd roll his eyes at half the things I said." Her voice cracked. "And then I realized I don't even know what his voice would sound like now," she continued. "I only have the memories of a 7-year-old. That's all I get? Forever?" I didn't know what to say to that. There was nothing to say, so I just stepped closer. She looked up at me, tears streaming freely now. "You shouldn't have come," she said again. But there was no force behind it. "This isn't your responsibility. I'm not your responsibility." "I didn't come because I thought you were," I said. "I came because I know what it's like to sit alone on a day like this, and I didn't want you to have to." Her face crumpled, and then she was in my arms. I didn't reach for her first. She moved, closing the space between us in 2 quick steps, pressing her face against my chest as sobs tore out of her in waves. I held her. Not gently, not carefully, tightly, like she was the only thing keeping me grounded too. Her hands fisted in the fabric of my jacket. Her whole body shook. I felt the wetness of her tears soak through my shirt, felt the way her breath hitched and stuttered against my ribs. "I can't do this anymore," she choked out between sobs. "I can't keep pretending I'm strong enough to carry this alone." "Then don't," I said into her hair. "You don't have to." "Everyone expects me to be over it," she said, voice muffled. 5 years is long enough, they say. Time to move on, they say. Time to be whole. Again. But I'm not whole. I'm never going to be whole. There's a piece of me buried with them, and it's never coming back. I tightened my hold on her. You don't have to be whole, I said. You just have to be here. That's enough. She pulled back just enough to look up at me, her face blotchy and raw. Is it? She asked. Is it really enough? Because most days I feel like I'm just going through the motions, like I'm a ghost pretending to be alive. I know, I said. I know exactly what that feels like. She searched my face, looking for something, proof, maybe, that I wasn't just saying it, that I really did understand. Your wife, she said, the cancer, how did you keep going after? I took a slow breath. Honestly, I said, for the first year I didn't. I woke up. I went to work. I came home. I repeated it until the days blurred together. I didn't think about the future because I couldn't imagine one that didn't have her in it. And now, she asked, now, I said slowly, I'm still figuring it out. But I know that standing here with you doesn't feel like betraying her. It feels like being allowed to breathe again. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I'm terrified, she whispered, of what this means, of what happens if I let myself feel something other than grief. What are you afraid will happen? I asked gently. That I'll forget them, she said. That if I'm happy even for a second, it means I didn't love them enough. That moving forward means leaving them behind. I cupped her face carefully, my thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. Evelyn, I said, you could live another 50 years, and you would never forget them. They're not in the past. They're part of you. They always will be. Then why does it feel like I'm betraying them every time I smile? She asked, her voice breaking. Because grief is cruel, I said. It tells you that love means suffering forever. But that's not what they would have wanted, your husband, your son. They loved you. And people who love you don't want you to drown. She closed her eyes, more tears slipping free. I don't know how to stop drowning, she whispered. You don't have to do it alone, I said. That's what I'm here for. She opened her eyes, and in that moment I saw all of it, the fear, the exhaustion, the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry this alone anymore. Alex, she said, her voice barely audible, I think I'm falling for you. The words hung in the air between us, raw and terrifying and achingly honest. My heart stopped, then started again, harder. I know I shouldn't, she continued quickly, like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve. I know it's too soon, too complicated, too dangerous. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend that these nights with you are just grief management, that you're just someone who understands, because you're more than that now, and it scares the hell out of me. I stared at her, the woman who terrified boardrooms and commanded empires, standing in her living room in an old sweater, confessing something that could destroy both of us. Evelyn, I said, my voice rough, I'm falling for you too. Her breath caught. You are? She asked, like she didn't quite believe it. Yes, I said. I have been for weeks, maybe since that first night, I don't know. All I know is that when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore. I feel like I'm actually living. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. This is insane, she said. Completely, I agreed. It could ruin everything, she added. Probably, I said. And you still want this? She asked, searching my face. I leaned down, resting my forehead against hers. More than I've wanted anything in a very long time, I said. She closed her eyes, her hands coming up to rest against my chest. Then stay, she whispered. Please, just stay. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And I didn't. We moved to the couch, and she curled into my side, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Outside, the day turned to evening. The light shifted. The shadows grew longer. But inside, in that house that had been a mausoleum for 5 years, two people who had been drowning alone finally let themselves hold on to each other. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of us felt like we were sinking.